హుషారు వేగం బేజారు నా రోజా నువ్వే నా దిల్ సే నువ్వే నా అంజలి నువ్వే గీతాంజలి నువ్వే నా రోజా నువ్వే నా దిల్ సే నువ్వే నా అంజలి నువ్వే గీతాంజలి నువ్వే.
Hi, I'm Joe Chetty. Catch me every Monday on a brand new show called Money Matters from 7 to 8 p.m., where we unravel the mysteries of money, offering expert insights and real world tips. Start your week right, because when it comes to finances, we are not just talking rands and cents. We are making sense of your sense. Money Matters with me, Joe Chetty, every Monday from 7 to 8 p.m., only on Southside FM 107.2. And very good evening to you, listeners, and welcome to the Monday Money Matters with your host Joe Chetty. I'm so glad that you chose to spend your evening with us. So on this magical Monday, and in keeping with the theme of freedom, and that's money freedom, we are going to address the topic of debt. Yeah, I know it sounds like death, but we are not talking about death tonight. We are talking about debt as in credit. In fact, credit in some instances may seem like a death sentence, but this evening we are going to talk about how to make your over indebtedness more manageable. So, with soaring interest rates and the cost of living increasing by alarming proportions, many South Africans are feeling the pinch and are quite stressed about how to make ends meet. In fact, stats show, and I'm going to quote this from my research, a significant percentage of South Africans are struggling to keep up with their debt obligations, as 42% of respondents across various income levels say they cannot manage their debt. Only 16% have no debt. Studies have shown that South Africans spend more than 75% of their take home pay on paying debt. Close quote. So, if you are one of those that feel like you are trapped in a vicious cycle of your existing debt and you are actually looking or creating more debt, I'm hoping that by the end of this show, the information you receive will ease some of the stress and make you help you sleep better at night. So, the all important question is how? But as usual, before I introduce my guest, please take note of the following disclaimer. Any information shared on the show cannot be regarded as financial advice, and neither Southside FM, its employees, or the presenter and his guests are responsible for any action or inaction taken on the part of the listeners. You may send us your questions that you have on WhatsApp 074 345 4447. That's 074 345 4447. And we are also live on Facebook. And if you want to check us out, go to Southside FM South Africa. So tonight I have with me an expert in the field of debt review and consolidation, and that's none other than Surya. She is an admitted attorney and a registered debt counselor and the sole director of Surya Grobler Attorneys, SGA. Surya holds the following qualifications: LLB, BA Law, and a certificate in debt counseling. With over a decade of experience in debt counseling and civil litigation, Surya is passionate about helping individuals and businesses navigate the complexities of debt-related matters. So, welcome to the Monday Money Matters with Joe Chetty, Surya. Today's show is not a subject that many of us want to talk about, and we often suffer in silence, not knowing who to turn to when we land there. So I'm really looking forward to the knowledge that you are going to share with us, and I'm quite excited that it's going to give us the value that we are going to get from you tonight, and I'm looking forward to spending this hour with you. So,
Thank you, Joe, so much for inviting me, and I am really looking forward to sharing my knowledge with you.
no, that's great, Surya. Like I said, we're really looking forward to it. So, to kick off, let's talk about it. Why was debt review introduced?
So to interlude with your intro, debt counseling was introduced through the National Credit Act as a direct response to the alarming increase in over indebted consumers in South Africa, caused by factors such as a lack of education regarding financial management, budgeting, and reckless lending.
So what you're saying that is debt review was actually introduced to help over indebted people?
That's correct.
Good,
Yes.
good. So what is debt counseling all about?
In a nutshell, debt counseling is a legal process through which your repayments to your creditors will be renegotiated by your debt counselor to make provision for your necessary monthly expenses. We are sitting in a situation where consumers cannot afford to pay basic monthly expenses and afford to repay the debt that they need to pay to their creditors.
Mm,
It's also a mechanism that can be used through which you can prevent your salary from being attached
mm.
because unfortunately when you stop paying your debt counselors do have your debt um, collectors,
Yeah.
apologies, have a mechanism to attach your salary, which is called a garnish order, and they can even attach your salary, your assets, and repossess your home or your vehicle. So debt counseling serves as a mechanism to protect you from those legal proceedings being instituted against you.
So essentially, when one has debt and you arrive at a situation where you are struggling to pay for it, then this debt counseling mechanism is there to make your life a little bit easier. Is that what you're saying?
That's 100% correct. One of the main factors that are taken into consideration when doing a debt counseling proposal is to look at the necessary household expenses. You have to have a fund to be able to travel to and back from work. If you have children, you have to pay school fees. You have to be able to buy groceries. So, if you apply to a registered debt counselor in the correct debt space, your debt counselor will hopefully be able to provide for the necessary living expenses and also to be able to supply enough funds to allocate to your credit providers to get that debt settled within a reasonable time.
So it's more like an issue of trying to be fair on both sides for the creditor and for you as an individual.
That's correct. You can't, for example, say, I'm going to repay my credit card over 100 years.
Mm.
That's not going to work. So it's a mathematical equation that the debt counselor have to work with. And in a sense, the consumer also needs to commit to the process to becoming debt free in the sense that there might be budget cuts. If you are in a situation where you are struggling to pay your debt, you might have to get your house help to only come in maybe once or twice a week instead of every day of the week. There are certain luxuries that people can get rid of that they don't necessarily need.
So hold on to that thought because later on we are going to talk about the process of what where you need to
Mm.
cut and how you manage this. I know I often see on the internet and I see on Facebook and I see everywhere when people advertise on socials and so on that if you are in financial trouble, come to us and we will get your debt wiped off. In other
Yes.
words, you don't have to pay anything. Now, how can you caution our listeners with regards to whether that is true or not?
Yes, that is a very, very interesting question, and it is I would say, dangerous territory to tread on. I've heard adverts on the radio, for example, where it is advertised that um, if you come to us, we can get you debt free within 2 months.
Mm.
But repaying your debt equates to a mathematical equation. If you do a simple mathematical equation, you cannot reduce your installments and repay your debt within a lesser
The same
time
period.
than, say, for example, you signed your credit agreement for 4 months or 36 months. How, if you reduce your installment, are you going to repay your debt
For that.
in 24 months? So the only way, and that's the method on which the debt counseling system works, is that we have to extend the period over which you repay your debt, and we have to negotiate reduced interest terms with the creditors. So, depending on the availability of the disposable income that you have after you have made provision for your necessary household expenses, a debt counselor would either be, there's different types of proposals that we can run. If, for example, we run a DCRS proposal, which is universally accepted proposals by the credit providers and the debt counselors, we can bring those interest rates right down to 0.01%. But that's all depending on the availability of disposable income when you apply for debt review.
Okay, no, that's interesting because I think there is some thought out there that if I get into trouble and I go to this particular person, that they can wipe my debt out. But what I'm understanding you're saying is that the debt doesn't get wiped out. All that could happen is that it could be paid over a much longer period, perhaps maybe with a lesser interest rate, and I presume that creditors are aware that it could be worse. If you get into deeper trouble, they could get nothing out of it, so they are happy to talk about a about some sort of negotiation, about meeting halfway, and you can get into this kind of arrangement, correct?
Not 100% no. In terms of the provisions of the National Credit Act, credit providers have to negotiate in good faith. Well, all parties, the debt counselor, the consumer, and the credit provider, have to negotiate in good faith in debt review proceedings. So there is a certain amount of responsibility on the credit provider to negotiate reduced interest rates and extended repayment terms.
So both parties are a win at the end of the day. Both
Yes.
parties get value. Okay, great. So if somebody out there is listening to us and is thinking about, can I get into this process? What do I need to get into this process? How would a person know if they are eligible for debt counseling?
Okay, so being eligible for debt counseling is very simple. The main consideration would be for you to be over indebted.
Okay.
And over indebtedness means that once you have taken your net salary and you have deducted your necessary monthly expenses, you will not have sufficient funds to service your debt obligations. In other words, you are going to end up in a deficit. And obviously, that would cause major problems in the sense of, like I said, phone calls, SMSs, letters, and eventually people being summoned and their assets being attached or their salaries being attached.
So let me take an example, right? Let's say I earn an income of 10,000 rands,
Mm.
and I find that my necessary expenses or my obligatory expenses, like my utilities, lights and water, my bond, my car, my
Groceries.
groceries, all those things that I need so
Mm.
that life can happen,
Mm.
if I find that uh, the income that I'm coming home with
Mm.
is a lot less than those expenses, then at that point I can decide, now I want to find a person like Surya, and I want to go through this process. Is that what you're saying?
Most definitely, your calculation is very concerning because of the fact that uh, if your expenses exceed your income to begin with, and a creditor provides you with credit without doing the proper and necessary assessments, it could amount to reckless
Reckless credit.
credit.
Yeah. So we'll come to reckless credit now. I'm
Yeah.
saying that I'm not going to apply for more credit.
Yeah.
So I've got all of this credit.
Yeah.
I've got my clothing accounts and
Yes.
so on, and the interest rates have gone up, for
Yeah.
example, and I'm finding it
Yes.
difficult to meet these obligations.
Yes.
Is that at that point then it's the correct time for me to say, look, let me try and go into this process?
Most definitely. The Act also makes a very clear provision that you can enter into this process if you foresee yourself becoming over indebted in the future. So, for example, if you do have a bond and the interest rate is not set, and now it's prime plus two and prime plus two, and the interest rate is just going up and going up, and you can see yourself in a situation where you won't be able to afford your bond installment in 3 months' time, you are also eligible for debt review. So it's for over indebted consumers as well as um, consumers that foresee themselves landing themselves in a over indebted
Situation.
position in the future.
So what happens then? At what point then does an individual not qualify to go into the debt review process?
When a consumer applies for debt review, the debt counselor will do an assessment based on three main things: your income, your household expenditure, and your credit expenditure. So it's very simple to see from that equation as to whether a person is over indebted or not. If you can afford to pay your debt and your basic household expenses at the end of the month or not. The National Credit Regulator has set together a task team, and they issued a task team report in 2015. And in the task team report, for example, it states that if you are going to find yourself to be over indebted, then you need to get rid of luxuries such as ski boats, second homes, third cars. There's a list that uh, yes, ideally you would obviously want to try and then liquidate these assets first to see if you can cope then, because now I don't have to pay for two extra cars and my ski boat and my second or third home. So that could assist a person with over indebtedness if run correctly. Also, when we apply to court with these applications, the courts look at this type of thing,
Yeah,
and they, yeah,
to make the final
yes,
decision. Yeah.
yes.
No, that's great. I think that's good information. But I'm also of the opinion that, and I think I probably read somewhere that if a creditor sends you a um, reminder,
Section
and
129.
yeah, so explain what a section 129 is.
Okay, so a section 129 is similar to a letter of demand. Okay, it's a letter that, in terms of the National Credit Act, warns you. So before a creditor can issue summons against you, they have to send you what is called a section 129, which is a warning letter. The warning letter is very specific. It has to have specific wording, and in the letter, it has to state that you have 20 business days to either contact the credit provider to make an arrangement to repay the debt or refer the matter to a debt counselor. So previously, we had an issue with that. We were actually a party to the court proceedings in the appellate division with regards to that issue. Is that they said that once the Section 129 was issued, a person could not apply for debt review. And since then, if I recall correctly, in 2015, the Act was amended to say that if a person receives a Section 129 notice, or what's referred to sometimes as a letter of demand, they can still go under debt review. You can put any credit agreement under debt review up until the time that summons has been served on you by the sheriff of the court.
So again, our listeners need to take heed of this, is that should you be in the scenario and you receive this letter of demand, if you don't act on it, like maybe going to a debt counselor or making the arrangements, then the next process would be summons, and then that particular asset or cannot go under debt review.
That's correct.
Okay, no, that's good. I'm glad you cleared that out, because sometimes, we get these accounts and suddenly say, hey, we're just gonna not do anything about it, and when we arrive at the situation to say where can we get the reprieve, it's too late. So I believe that there are stringent processes that are in place when one needs to get into the debt review process. So can you explain the process of debt counseling in South Africa?
Yes.
From the initial stage right up to resolution.
Okay. So in a nutshell, the first part of the application process will be to fill out an application form for your debt counselor. It's a simple form. It usually comprises of your personal information. So your debt counselor can establish jurisdiction of which court you're going to bring the application from. Secondly, you need to list your income. That's basically just a copy of your pay slip or salary advice. Your household expenses. The debt counselor will then usually use the household expenses and say, oh, you can cut a little bit there. You don't need 2,000 Rand for clothing a month or this or that. So you can cut a bit on the budget and still make provision for necessary household expenses. And then obviously a list of creditors needs to be provided to the debt counselor, and that all forms part of the form. However, I always tell my clients, don't worry too much about the list of creditors, because if you consent to me doing an ITC report, I can draw that. And with the debt counseling, that makes it easier, because then you can immediately see what's owing, what's being paid per month, what the interest rate is, and what the leftover term on the contract is.
So that's what an ITC report is.
Yes, a credit bureau report, basically.
Okay, all right.
What's also very important to note is that I think a lot of consumers do not know is that no one can draw a credit report on you without your written consent or telephonic verbal consent.
So it can be written or telephonic verbal.
Yeah. Okay. So I can't go and draw, if I've got your ID number, go and draw a report on you. I have to have you either written or recorded verbal consent to do that. The second step then, with regards to the debt review, is that within 5 business days of receiving the application form, or the Form 16 that we refer to, the debt counselor must notify all the listed creditors on the ITC report that this person has applied for debt review. Okay? Your third step would be the debt counselor needs to do an assessment then and decide as to whether this consumer is over indebted or not. We've discussed over indebtedness now to say that you're in deficit. If the debt counselor does decide to declare the consumer over indebted, a form 16.2 goes 17.2 goes out, and all your creditors are notified of the fact that you have now been declared over indebted and that the debt review process will be proceeding.
So a 17.2 is a letter that goes to the creditors
Yes,
to inform them that you're going through this process.
that's correct. The consumer will also then be listed on the debt help system, the National Credit Regulators debt help system. And this is where the credit bureaus draw their information from. So as soon as the debt counselor puts the consumer on that system, they will be flagged on all the credit bureaus as being having applied for debt review. The debt counselor then has to do a proposal showing the net income, the household expenses, and the suggested repayment to the creditors. And that is what will then be sent out to the creditors. That will determine the amount that will be paid by the consumer every month under the debt review. An important thing to note, however, is when your debt counselor does your proposal for you, it has to disclose the fees, the debt counseling fee, as well as the legal fee that needs to be paid.
Through
It,
to the debt counselor.
yes, so that forms part of your proposal. We prefer our clients to sign the proposal off to say that they are actually aware that these fees are going to be charged. Usually, these fees aren't charged over and above the installment. They worked into the first 2 months of the installment. So, say for example, we decide you're going to pay, like I said, 5,000 Rand a month. Your debt counselor will take the first 5,000. Your attorney will take the second 5,000, and in the third month, your credit providers will start.
Repaid.
But the Act makes provision for this because of the fact that if someone's over indebted and they can't even afford to pay the debt, how am they going to pay the debt counselor's fee up
Yeah,
front?
that was the point I was going to make.
Mm.
Now, you're struggling to make your payments for your debt, and where are you going to find this money? So,
Yes.
so to be able to help them out, we are saying that once the proposal is done, then the first 2 months payments that will be made will be paid to the service providers like the debt counselor and the attorney,
That's
and
correct.
then from the third month it gets distributed through to the creditors.
Yes,
So that way they don't have to now go and take another loan from somebody
exactly.
around the corner to say, look, I need to pay these fees because I want to go
Yeah.
get into that process.
The Act does, however, make provision for this.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. And it makes sense because, like you said earlier on, where do you find the money to do this? That's just to be able to give them a reprieve with regards to that. And then once the proposal is done, then I believe there's a court hearing, a court order. Just explain that there.
That's correct. You get two types of proposals. One is an acceptance, where once you send out the acceptance, all the credit providers accept the debt counselor's proposal, and they say, "I'm happy to proceed."
Now, on that point, can a creditor say, I'm not accepting it?
Yes, that's the second point I'm coming
Okay.
to.
Okay.
This is where negotiations start, and where the matter gets set down in court. If the debt counselor is within reasonable terms with the proposal, that matter gets argued before the magistrates. So the debt counselor's attorney will argue, and the credit provider's attorney will argue, and the magistrate will make a decision based on the evidence placed before the court. So it's important that when the debt counselor does the proposal, basically what we need to prove at that stage is that the proposal is going to solve within a reasonable time. Like I said, we're not going to repay the debt over 100 years. I'm within my 60 months, or I'm So
So there must be fairness on both sides.
yes.
Okay.
Again, we get back to that everyone must participate in good faith in the debt review
So,
proceeding.
so once the negotiations take place, the second round, if the first time around the creditor says no, look, we can't accept this. The second time around, you do the negotiation, and then what's the final step?
Just before we get to the final step, usually what the credit provider that doesn't accept it will do is they will send what we call a counter proposal. They will say, oh, we don't want 150 Rand a month, we want 200 Rand a month. So we can go back to the consumer and say, oh, you're going to pay 50 Rand more a month, or are we going to really go to argument in courts over 50 Rand? So that's the second part of the negotiation process. Then we go to court and we argue, and the magistrate will have to make a decision based on the arguments and the evidence placed before the court.
Look, great. Look, it sounds like a really intricate process, but I suppose when you have somebody like you managing the process, then it makes life a lot easier.
Yes, it's what I live for. It's what I've been doing for 14 years.
Yeah. So Surya, what we're going to do now is we're going to take a break, and once we come back, we are going to then continue with what further, where we're going to talk about the benefits of debt counseling and so on.
Perfect. Thank you.
For Money Matters from 7 to 8 p.m., where we unravel the mysteries of money, offering expert insights and real world tips. Start your week right, because when it comes to finances, we are not just talking rands and cents. We are making sense of your sense. Money Matters with me, Joe Chetty, every Monday from 7 to 8 p.m., only on Southside FM 107.2. Welcome back, listeners. We are speaking to Surya Krobler this evening, and we are speaking about debt counseling. And prior to this, we are talking about the administrative processes that needs to be followed with regards to debt counseling. And now we are going to talk about the benefits. So, Surya, talk to us about the benefits of enrolling into the debt counseling program.
Okay, so the benefits are mainly when you're applying for debt review is that you get protected from credit providers harassing you and instituting legal proceedings against you and attach or repossess your movable assets or your salary. Um, this also means that over indebted consumers can prevent judgment being taken against them for late or non payment of outstanding debt obligations, such as credit card debt, unpaid overdraft loans, and other credit agreements, such as clothing accounts, etc. I have previously mentioned as well that it can be very stressful for a consumer to have to deal with this influx of all these credit providers calling you,
or when you get all these letters saying you need to pay this, I've got that demand, and all those fancy things, it can really be overwhelming.
It does it's very stressful for people. A lot of consumers that we deal with, we get all different walks of life, single moms, um, someone that's lost a part of the family income. So definitely debt review there can give some relief to those consumers in assisting them.
In fact, last week we spoke about money and mindset,
Mm.
and the stresses around money, and this can cause enormous stress. I know prior to debt counseling being introduced, there was often this worry that I'm going to lose my house, and I'm going to lose my car, and my furniture is going to get picked up. So, if I have to sum up what you are saying here, you're saying to me that debt counseling actually can prevent your assets being attached.
Oh, definitely.
It gives you that reprieve to be able to say, fine, I'm going through some difficulty now. I'm still willing to to pay my debt off, but I need a bit of a break. I need you to kind of just stretch this out a bit, or perhaps maybe even consider reducing the rates. I still want to pay what I want to pay. Uh, Please, can you consider that now there's a process in terms of the court getting involved, and also this not only protects the individual that's applying, it also protects the creditor. Correct?
It does, most definitely, because if a consumer does not buy in terms of the court order, the credit provider has every right to enforce proceedings, legal proceedings against the consumer in terms of the provisions of Section 88.3 of the National Credit Act. Um, so, yes, debt review is not a one-way street. You know, the consumers have to also, like you said, change their mindset and commit to try and get themselves out of debt. But I've seen that over indebtedness can lead to anxiety and depression, and um, you know, that leads to all sorts of other illnesses, and it's not healthy for the home environment.
Yeah.
And that's where I find where debt review can definitely help, because now the consumer knows, oh, I've got X, Y, and Z available to spend on my household budget every month, and I'm paying X amount to the debt counselor, and they pay my debt every month, and they sort it out.
Yeah. So it's a two-way street, and consumers must also play their part when they get into the space.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah. So, Surya, tell me, what types of debt can be included in the debt counseling program,
Okay.
and how does debt counseling address the different types of debt, such as credit card, personal loans, mortgage loans, and
Okay,
so on?
so the National Credit Act is very clear on what types of debt can be placed under debt review and not. I'm not going to bore you with the longevity of it, but basically, in essence, anything that is referred to as a credit agreement can be placed under debt review. So, a credit agreement will typically be a bond, a vehicle installment, a personal loan, overdraft, credit cards, clothing accounts. And then there are certain things that the Act does not allow for it to be placed under debt review. That would usually be debt related to juristic persons. There are certain instances, but it's capped at different monetary values. But usually, you can't place a juristic person. For example, juristic person meaning a business,
Business, okay.
a PTY Limited or a CC. You can place him under business rescue, but you can't place a business under debt
Debt
review. It
review.
has to be an actual person that needs to get placed under debt review.
But on that score, if an individual owns a company,
Mm,
he or she is the director in that company,
mm,
struggling to make, finding
mm,
it difficult to make ends
mm.
meet, can that individual go into debt review in their personal capacity?
Yes, in the event that the debt that they want to put under the debt review is in their personal capacity. Needs to be a personal credit card or a personal loan or a personal clothing account. It can't be in any way connected
The
to
company.
the company. So it's
The
something
business.
that you have to separate completely.
No, wonderful. Is anything you want to add around that?
Just also, service providers aren't uh, recognized as credit providers. So a service provider would be someone that provides a service like a doctor or a cell phone company. So usually those would be made provision for under the living expenses and not the credit agreements.
So in that case, they would then an individual go to a service provider and say, "Look, I'm under debt review. I am finding it difficult to make my payments, and I want to make an arrangement with you to be able to pay off my debt because I'm finding it difficult on a personal basis without getting involved in the process.
Well, if you with a good debt counseling company, we would usually do that for you.
Okay.
We would write a letter. Just the interesting fact is that a service provider can become what we call an incidental credit. So if a service provider's account gets handed over to a collection agency and they charge certain fees or interests, it becomes an incidental credit agreement which you can actually place under the debt review. So,
Oh, so all these technical things. So what you're saying to me is go to a professional
yes,
and get advice.
yes.
As opposed to saying, look, let me try and handle this on
Yes.
my own, and then you get into deeper trouble, and then you can't fix the problem.
Yes, that's what we ask fee for, and that's where I explained the aftercare fee to you as well. Is that if you've got a decent debt counselor, your debt counselor will actually manage these
Yeah.
type of issues for you.
And we're going to come to how one chooses a debt counselor later on, but I want to bring something often that I hear people talking about, because they say, look, and being in the space, being a money skills facilitator, being someone that works in the space where I do money literacy and money education and money coaching. When I have conversations with my clients, they say to me, but if I go into debt counseling, it's going to mess up my credit score and it's going to be too bad. Take our listeners through to what impact this process has on your credit score.
Okay, so once you apply for debt review, your debt counselor is obligated in terms of the provisions of the National Credit Act to list you on what I've explained before is the DHS help system that's connected to the National Credit Regulator. The credit bureaus have to update their systems from there. So there will be a flag on your system to say that you have now applied for debt review. In other words, anyone that draws your credit report will be able to see that you're under debt review and you can't incur any further debt. I've noticed that a concern with some of the consumers is that when I go under debt review, I won't be able to incur any further debts. But usually, by the time we get our consumer, they are so over indebted and so behind with their payments that they won't be able to get a loan in any event. So, in my opinion, it would be better then to refer the matter to a debt counselor because you will be able to then repay the debt at a lower interest rate.
Okay. But it also means that while you are in this process of going through debt review or debt counseling, that you cannot incur any further credit, correct?
Yes,
Okay.
not at all.
Now, you mentioned twice this evening the word flagged.
Mm.
Okay. Um, and I know there's also some thought that if I go through this process, to take it further from what I asked you earlier on, is that I'm going to be blacklisted.
Yes.
Now, let's talk about this issue of blacklisting, because it sounds like, first of all, such a rude word, so to say. It's a word that people are, I think, as individuals, we are embarrassed about. Let's talk about this word blacklisted and whether one is blacklisted or not.
Um, Blacklisted is an old term. Where if you were in arrears with your debt or you couldn't pay it properly, you were deemed to be blacklisted. The credit bureaus were completely different now. So you work on a credit scoring. Whether you have a debt review flag, we call it a flag now. So, for example, or a diverse listing. If you've got a judgment against your name, or if you're under a debt review, you will call it a flag or a diverse listing. It comes up on your credit report when a creditor takes a look at your report to see if you can qualify. Um, and the credit bureaus work on credit scoring these days. So when you apply for a loan, it's very important, number one, to have a good credit record, a credit record. That means that you don't have too many loans, but you don't have no loans, because for some reason you have to have a loan to be able to take out a loan.
It's like a chicken and an egg.
Yes, and show that you pay that on a very regular basis. And then also, with regards to uh, scoring, the banks have different ways of scoring clients, I've noticed. And yes, it's just important to realize that one flag, for example, if your debt review flag is lifted from your debt review, it doesn't mean that you will immediately be able to apply for a loan. You will have to build up your credit score. In other words, you're going to have to make a small little loan. I usually joke with my clients and say to them, go and buy a pack of underwear and make sure you pay it every single month. Just so you can lift your credit score. And then also, don't go to a bunch of companies um, and request loans, because every single time that you apply for a loan, it comes up on your credit
Score or
and
report.
your reports, and every single request that is done on your credit report brings down your scoring. So there's various factors that come into play with regards to credit scoring. So people, to answer your question, need to understand that it's not just blacklisting that prevents you from getting credit. The bank also has to do a proper affordability assessment before they loan your money. So they have to take into account your income and your household expenses. And if they don't do that properly, it can be regarded as reckless lending, provided that you were honest when you filled in your application form.
Yeah. So the issue around building the credit score again, or for somebody that's starting out,
Mm.
is more like saying, fine, um, and as you mentioned, don't apply to too many people, because if you do and you keep getting declined, then somebody sees you as a bad payer, and then you don't necessarily get the loans that you need to get. Or they also may say, fine, we're going to give you the loan, but you look like a bad payer, so your rate is going to be much higher. And that makes life difficult for you to be able to borrow money. On the score of coming back to the issue of blacklisting, my understanding now from what you are telling me, and I hope I'm correct in that, there is that when you go into debt review, you are placed in a scenario where you don't get credit anymore.
Yes.
Okay. And then for you to be able to get credit again, is that they don't look at the fact that, hey, you've been gone under debt review, so you're not going to get credit again. What they are saying that is that we will consider giving you credit, but you must now show us again that you are, for want of a better word, rehabilitated,
Yes.
that you've now gone through this process and you are rebuilding the score
That's
to back
correct.
you where you once had it.
Yes, that's correct.
Is that correct? Okay.
Yeah.
Great. So I'm interpreting you well, and I'm sure our listeners out there
I'm hoping
are
so.
also getting that value. Earlier on, I also mentioned that we are going to come to the point of somebody that says, "Fine, I'm considering this process because I'm really finding it difficult, and tonight I've gotten good value and I understand how this works now." For somebody that wants to go out there and get into this process, what should they look for in a reputable debt counseling agency?
Hmm?
What does this debt counselor need to comply with? What are the compliance requirements that this debt counselor needs to follow?
Okay, so a debt counselor has to be registered with the National Credit Regulator. You have to have an NCRDC number, and this can be found on the NCR's website, being www.ncr.org.za / register. Alternatively, you can contact them on 0860 627 627. It is extremely important for people that want to enter either mediation or debt counseling to make sure that their debt counselor or mediator is registered with the correct body. Yeah, because like I mentioned before, we get scrutinized quite closely by these bodies to make sure that we comply with all the rules.
So you have to follow the necessary
Oh,
processes.
definitely.
You get audited,
We
and
do.
all those fancy things that happen. So just to recap, well, in case listeners you didn't get that, you can go and you could Google the National Credit Regulator and
Yes,
go into the inquiry section, and all the details will be in there. And then you look for whether this particular person that you want to deal with or you've found is registered.
that's correct.
I think important then to also mention to listeners is what happens if you decide or you don't go through this process. In other words, you see something on Facebook or you go to some social media, and you find that this person has said, I can do X, Y, and Z for you when it comes to debt counseling. You don't do this kind of homework. You take on the person's services, and then you have an issue later on. What's your recourse?
Uh,
Perhaps maybe what perhaps maybe what I should ask you is, if you go with somebody that is registered, what's your recourse compared to somebody that's not registered?
with regard to someone that's registered, you can lay a complaint with the National Credit Regulator. The National Credit Regulator will then address the issue with the debt counselor and give them a certain time frame in which they must provide all the necessary documents requested in the specific complaint and address the complaint. If the debt counselor does not comply timeously, then further proceedings may be instituted against the debt counselor, and you could eventually end up being deregistered. With someone that's not registered, it's very
Yeah.
difficult.
So before you go to somebody that's not registered, and if you find that this particular debt counseling company that is registered is giving you all these hassles, um, then I am presuming that the regulator could now say, hey, you know what, this person didn't do their job, and they move you to somebody that can do that job. And then as a consumer, I'm protected, or as an individual that took that on, how am I protected?
Yes, normally what the regulator will do is there's a compliance procedure that needs to be followed, um, compliance at NCR. And first they will uh, veto the debt counselor. But you, as a consumer, at any time have the right to move to another debt counselor. You don't have to lay a complaint. You can always lay a complaint, um, you know, um,
If you're
yeah,
not happy.
but you at any time can move from one debt counselor to another.
Okay. And then I suppose if the person is not registered, you can probably kiss your money goodbye. You got no recourse. Okay. So the reason I'm asking you this is it's important for our listeners also to understand that whatever you're doing, whether it's in debt counseling, whether it's in financial planning, whether it's in any other space, that it's always important to go to somebody that is regulated
Yes.
so that there is recourse. Great. So tell me, Surya, because I see we are running out of time
We
here.
are.
What is the difference between debt review and debt consolidation? We may have to have another session here. What is the review? What is the difference between debt review and debt consolidation?
Okay, I'm going to give you a quick recap. So, debt review is a legal process in which the monthly repayments to credit providers are consolidated into one monthly payment, which is made by the Payment Distribution Agency, which is also regulated by the National Credit Regulator. A consolidation loan is taken from a financial institution to settle your outstanding debt. So basically, you're making a loan from one company to pay all your all your other loans. It does not necessarily say that you are going to have enough income to qualify for a loan big enough to settle all your other creditors. So they might only be able to settle a few of the creditors. So, in my opinion, also if you are in arrears with your payments and you have a bad credit record, the chances that you will qualify for a consolidation loan is very slim. So if you want to consider consolidation, I would recommend to do that before you fall into arrears, when you realize that you're going to fall into arrears with the account.
Yeah, because your credit report is going to show that you are a poor payer, so to
Yes.
say. So in other words, if I have to look at the two, we say that in the debt review process, you have a little bit more protection because the
Yes.
court orders certain the court, there's an order in terms of the proposals that you put through,
That's correct.
and all the creditors will abide by that. In consolidation, you go and find your own money, you settle what you need to settle, and there's no protection if you have to get back into that scenario.
Yeah, if you, for example, can't repay that loan, you're going to be in the same trouble again.
And then you're going to go for debt counseling. Yeah. And so again, I think just maybe to recap is, how can listeners take the first step towards seeking debt counseling if they believe that they need it?
The best way, also quickly, just in a nutshell, is that you need to get hold of a reputable and registered debt counselor. If you can get to a reputable and registered financial or debt counselor and have a proper consultation, they will be able to guide you in the right direction. Some people are eligible for debt review, others are not. But there are many services out there for over indebted consumers. And if you get to the correct person, they will be able to guide you in the right direction.
But do your homework.
Yes.
Okay. Finally, I'm going to ask you, Surya, is how does debt counseling help individuals develop better money habits or better literacy?
Okay, so what we found is that having to live off a planned budget and not being able to incur unnecessary debts for the duration of the debt review assists consumers in learning how to live within their financial means and budget. So you get used to not having to make loans that you don't really need. Unfortunately, we do have a culture of trying to keep up with the Joneses or Kardashians. And in many instances, this is a culture which causes consumers to be over indebted. So, when releasing consumers from debt review, we usually recommend them to try and utilize the funds that were allocated to the debt review to a savings, and that's, as I said previously, where we would refer them to an FSP, to gain advice with regards to that.
Yeah, FSP meaning a financial
Financial service
provider.
provider,
And
yes.
again, they need to be
Yeah, because we're
registered
not
to the
allowed
homework and so on.
to give that advice to consumers once exiting the debt review process.
Surya, I must say thank you very much for coming on board today, coming on the show and sharing your knowledge with us. I'm sure that the listeners out there have gained good value, that they have uh, got good information, and I'm hoping that they will be able to. This will be able to help them make good money decisions, and even I think if they want to move into the debt counseling process, that they use this information to find the right people and do their homework and get their compliance right. So there you have it, listeners. We hope that we have given you enough information to help you with looking at some options when it comes to the debt review. There are certain possibilities out there that can extend a helping hand to what